This is the closing panel of our first kind of Data for Society Day, right? This is the second day of Text by the Bay chunk of the Data by the Bay conference. And last year we had 2 days, mostly technical, but a lot of applications were already in various verticals, either law government as well. And this year we specifically designated 2 tracks, Data for Democracy and Law by the Bay. And we had amazing people, we had amazing talks today. We had big law firms, we had legal startups, we had City of San Francisco, we have OpenGov, right? We have kind of government hackers and legal hackers. And I think the atmosphere is, in famous saying of Mark Andreessen, software is eating the world, and these 2 areas are ripe for being eaten by software. But obviously there is a lot of people working there already. It may seem for us from the outside like we want to hack the technology, but the language is very different. The areas are very established and tricky, and so we have real experts working in these areas and working with data. And so the topic of this panel is essentially to understand how these areas work and where data is kind of most useful and how all of us can help, what opportunities are there. My name is Alexei Krabrov. I'm the founder of Data by the Bay, and I run the developer meetup, so I kind of represent the technology community, and I'll let all of the panelists introduce themselves. Each will take about 3 minutes and will tell us about the areas of expertise and how they use data in their daily lives and how they wish they could use data. And we'll pick up on that. And if you have some questions, we'll basically see if folks have questions, maybe we'll switch to them about halfway through the panel. So I'll let Brad start from that end.
Hi, I'm Brad Newman. I work for Cooley LLP, which is located in 101 California, where there was a Bernie rally. So I'm schwitzing here because I ran over. I got locked down by the Secret Service, although I'd probably be sweating anyway, frankly. But so I'm Practice Innovation Manager at Cooley. What does that mean? So I work in the Knowledge Management Department, which is in the Information Services Department. And as far as it relates to data, I don't know, how are you pronouncing it here? I'm also Canadian, so I'll just chalk that up there too. Part of my responsibilities include making things easier and more efficient for both our attorneys and our clients. Sourcing, getting tons of demos of, implementing various vendor technologies or building technologies, in part to harness a lot of the data that we gather in mostly, unfortunately, unstructured ways, which is what really attracted me to the position, to this opportunity at Cooley, because we serve, for example, my interest was in startups. Initially, I practiced in Toronto, where I'm from, then did a master's at Stanford in law, and then started working in the startup community. And what was really interesting to me about the position at Cooley was the fact that we serve hundreds, if not thousands, of startup companies at any given time. And a lot of that data, when I first joined a couple years ago, 2.5 years ago, was not being harnessed at all. So yeah, that's been a challenge, and by data I mean deal terms, capitalization tables, and that some things were in spreadsheets, some things were on CapMX, like on online platforms, and even things like offer letters, like all the data that's going into offer letters. Like we have a ton of information at our fingertips, but the focus until now has been on just document processing and not so much on capturing data in a structured way for analytics, et cetera. So that's one of my focuses.
Hello, I'm Jason Lally, and I'm the Open Data Program Manager for the City and County of San Francisco. You may know the program as Data SF. You may have heard of it, you may have not. Hopefully you have. I work for the Office of the Chief Data Officer, who's Joy Bonaguro. She set sort of a policy and strategic direction for the city as it relates to What started as open data and still is very important to our mission, but really is the core thing that we focus on is empowering use of the city's data. Because one of the things that Joy learned very early on in doing her listening tour at the city was there were actually a lot of internal users that were struggling with data use. It wasn't just the public. It wasn't just about getting access to data. And so really the problem is broader than open data. And so although I'm the open data program manager, focus really on this broader effort around making data access easier across the city, both to internal and external users. Often that's a Venn diagram. Open data can serve both internal and external, but sometimes it can't be open. What we're kind of struggling with right now, and really, we're not struggling with, but it's very similar actually. We've had an opportunity to talk to some of our private sector peers, and what we've realized is that a lot of the challenges that we have at the city are similar, that they're challenges of large data-rich organizations, just trying to grapple with how do you use tools, how do you deliver data to users who need it, and one of the sort of complexities we have is that we also have legal and policy frameworks that are very, very different, although not entirely. And so we have to grapple with that, but we also manage, the city has literally departments from A to Z, airport to the zoo. So, I mean, you're talking about 50 different departments, some human services, criminal justice. I mean, very, very, very different environments as it relates to data. So, taking a comprehensive approach to that across the city is challenging. And departments often have to do it on their own. And so the Office of the Chief Data Officer, we're trying to figure out ways that we can strategically address those concerns without telling people how to do something, right? Without demanding that they do it a certain way, but rather empowering them with the tools that they need. So that's what I'm doing. I'll pass it on.
Hi, my name is Gary Sanga. I've been told I'm the first serial legal tech entrepreneur. IntelliJa is my first legal tech startup. It's the market leader for preparing SEC filings like IPO documents, annual reports, and quarterly reports. And we use data analytics to tell people what's market. My second startup, it's called LitIQ, and the problem we're trying to solve is, frankly, drafting errors and screw-ups. So it's a big problem. So just so you guys know, about a quarter of all commercial disputes are made possible because of a drafting oversight of one form or another. Missing language, conflicting language, ambiguous language. And it's not because people are sloppy. For all you people that are founders of startups, and I hope you have an M&A exit sometime, you'll appreciate how big these documents are. The average merger agreement has doubled in size in the last 15 years. And folks still only have 24 hours in a day, right? So this stuff is not easy. And people are human, they make mistakes. So we're using computational linguistics to develop a diagnostics tool that can scan documents and find bugs that the lawyer may have missed. The type of documents that we use contracts for training data. We annotate them for ambiguities and whatnot. And we also analyze case law, so that we can then apply the lessons and rules from that into the software to help prevent needless litigation in the future. I'm also a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, which is a great school, right, Alexi?
It's pretty good.
And I'm partnering with the computational linguistics faculty, another great group, right, Alexi?
A very awesome group.
He got his PhD there, with this project, LitIQ. So that's my story.
Hi, I'm Lisa Malashenko. By way of background, I used to work at IBM in the energy and utilities practice, and I specialized in smart grid and smart cities and things like that. And then about 5-6 years ago, I moved over to the government sector and now work for the state of California at the California Public Utilities Commission, which is a place that regulates all of the infrastructure in California. So all essential utilities, gas, electricity, water, all the railroads in the states, and transportation, including Uber. And one of the stories that I like to tell is when I was still at IBM and I was looking for a job and I came in to interview at the PUC, one of the first steps is you have to take a state service exam. And that exam entails reading an article and then basically summarizing it. And they gave me a floppy disk onto which to save my replies to the questions. And I wasn't really sure if it was a joke or not, but it wasn't. And I was given very specific instructions of how to write my name on the floppy disk cover. Remember those stickies that it came with? And that's 5 years ago. And so that's the state of technology in the government space. And as I started working there, I learned of one of the reasons why I was still using floppy disks. And that was when I tried to upgrade one of the databases that we use. And it's a database that I have for gas and electric audits, and it's an Access. It was programmed by some guy literally in the early 90s. And I was like, okay, this isn't very good. Let's do something more creative. And I put in a project request through a state system. And then I learned that it is a 2.5 to 3 year approval cycle. So not a project cycle, approval cycle that has about 4 different steps of submitting proposals of different detail to the California Department of Technology that then, reviews it for 6 months and then gives you a green light to go to the next step of the analysis. And that's just to start implementation. From there, it basically proceeds at pretty much the same pace. And one of the catches is that you can't substitute your original request for a different technology down the line. So when I was requesting for this upgrade project 3 years ago now, whatever tool or solution I selected as what I was requesting, that's what has to get implemented. So I'm not going to go into more details as to why that's a problem, but that is how the state system works. So one of my messages to everyone is it's not impossible to sell solutions to the government, but it is extremely complicated, and you need to know what you're doing and how to navigate the government system. There are areas where it's easier, such as defense and security. Some types of agencies or government entities are easier than others, such as cities are a lot easier, and local government entities are a lot easier than state or federal. But what I want to focus on today is really opportunities for government and private sector partnership to solve big problems. And I'll give you one example of a problem that we're looking to solve right now. We've literally been having workshops on this, and that's utility poles. And it might not sound very exciting, but we have about 4.2 utility poles, and that's what you think it is, the poles you see outside in the state of California. And they actually present a over $10 billion problem because they're old and they're continuing to age. And to replace and upgrade those poles, it costs billions and billions of dollars. And if a pole fails, it can potentially lead to very serious consequences, including massive wildfires, which has happened in the past. So what do? The utilities right now have systems that are very basic in terms of trying to predict of what poles to replace. They're mostly based on age. But it's very inefficient, especially because the utility infrastructure built out in phases, and now everything is failing. The average age of a pole is about 50 years is what we're expecting, and over half of poles are already over 50 years old. In the next decade, 80% of them will be over 50 years old. So what do? So that's kind of the issue that we're trying to solve as a state, and there's different potential technological solutions in terms of predictive analytics for asset failure, and also data collection in the field of building apps and really being able to connect different data sources to manage this issue better. So I kind of give you a mixed message today. Working with government is really hard, but I think there's some exciting problems that if we all come together that we can figure out how to solve. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Nicole Shanahan. I wear two hats. One is the founder and CEO of Clear Access IP. It's a startup that's trying to fix the patent system. The second hat I wear is as a residential fellow at Stanford's Codex. And Codex is a joint center between the law school and the computer science department. And there, almost all of my work right now is dedicated to reforming the criminal justice system. So two big problems, and two problems that are really great for a technological solution. Both are, I've tried to draw comparisons between the two, and one is very impersonal. Patents are paper and invention and business, and then the criminal justice system really is it's all about kind of humans and welfare and fairness. But I think the grand promise that data offers us is the ability to see these systems for really what they are. With patents, it's about really understanding the pace of innovation and understanding transactional levers. And so there's a legal theory called transaction cost theory. And this was spearheaded by a man named Ronald Coase. And his theory was that where transaction cost equals zero, there's no place for lawyers. And that's because lawyers are exchangers of information. They're the ones that bring party A and B together where they otherwise wouldn't come together. And this really matters in the patent system and in a system of high innovation such as our society. We have people that are coming up with things incredibly quickly, and we need to find a way to pair these ideas and make the ownership of these ideas fair. Our current patent system does not do that. The only way to really monetize these assets is incredibly aggressive and has led to an entire industry called patent trolling. So, it's not a simple problem to solve, but I certainly think that in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to have some very unique approaches, including applying, for example, the blockchain. What does a blockchain patent system look like? It could happen in the next 10 years in which people have ideas, they use Ethereum's platform, and they can hash those ideas. And it's a record, it's a ledger of creation. And that's what the US patent system is, effectively. And then on the criminal justice side, what I really care about is understanding what is actually happening. I mean, we see anecdotally things on the news, and it's pretty atrocious. But deeply, when we really, really dig deeply, what do we see? And so using big data approaches, things like data mining and machine learning, we're going through some government databases right now at Stanford that you just wouldn't believe how little our government knows about what's actually happening. So yeah, my goal is to bring parties together to work on these two subject areas.
Thank you. I think there are multiple themes emerging from this. I was kind of wondering, we need to tie together two areas, and I think there are clearly points of intersection, right? So, for instance, criminal justice systems, government and law right there, right? And also IP. I think IP is very crucial to this space, but also in the whole patent law is hinging on government idea to have patent law, right? So in Japan, they didn't have patent law until very recently in the 19th century, and so once it's kind of its introduction in Meiji era kind of led to maybe one of the things which led to rapid development. So obviously, government has a hand in this. So it's I think, but for whatever reason, right, these two areas are very conservative. So we do not see much adoption of all this kind of, we can call this Netflix-like technology. So we have a talk on Friday in the Life Sciences Day, which is another slowly moving area, using Netflix-like approach to healthcare. So obviously, everybody knows Netflix or Amazon, right? So the question everybody was posing is, why can't we bring these things to law and government? And there are multiple reasons. Lawyers like to bill by the hour, right? They don't want to prove efficiency. But I mean, that cannot be all there is to it. And government obviously has a lot of red tape, but that cannot be all there is to it. So I'd like to pose to each of you the following question. What is the best example of innovation you've seen in your area? So you lead startups, you kind of have positions in these big corporations where you can affect change. What are the examples? Who are your role models? What are the shining examples of digital transformation in law and government you know about? And what is it that prevents these kind of examples from taking hold, spreading faster? In any order.
Shining examples?
Yes.
There are a number of really great things happening in this space, and it's actually moving very fast in some ways. Government often seems slow, but I don't want to risk offending some of my peers in this, but I'll highlight a couple that I think are really important to pay attention to, and they're probably things that most of you know about, but I'll mention them anyway. I think what 18F, which is at the federal level, has been doing and is now evolving, is really important to watch. You're talking about essentially a consulting model inside the federal government that is not just. They're doing open source, they're doing it well, they're building applications, they're rethinking the way that they publish data, but they're also thinking about procurement and working with private vendors. And so we are, the city, we're constantly watching 18F very closely. What's nice is they have offices in both DC and San Francisco, which is also kind of an innovation in the federal government, that these folks work remotely. They're in this sort of center of innovation, and it's a diverse group of folks that are really doing some really important work, I think. There are other, USDS is another variation. It's slightly different from the 18F model, but also at the federal level, coming out of the White House, essentially embedding people in other departments, which I think is an interesting model, and something that, again, we're watching very closely. And then there's always gov.uk, which was the one that kind of started them all. And I think for us, at the city, we did sort of a comprehensive analysis of different folks doing sort of digital transformation. And gov.uk, there's a lot to be inspired by. We wouldn't apply it exactly the same way in the San Francisco context because it's just different. But definitely there's a lot of inspiration there.
So what's innovative in the law firm world? Well, there are a couple of interesting developments, mainly around, again, trying to structure this largely unstructured data that we have in our document management system. So again, we have, let's see, between January and I think March, we produced 5 million documents. So Cooley is a 900 lawyer law firm, which is pretty big. There's much bigger. So I can't even imagine what that's like at the DLA Pipers of the world, for example, where there are like 3,000 lawyers. But so there are a lot of strides being made in machine learning technologies and how they're being applied to sorting data, classifying data, this unstructured data, whether it's in the documents or even in, so whenever a lawyer bills you, they typically just say, billing to your general corporate matter, and here's a free text narrative. And that narrative can change wildly between people, between different lawyers. Obviously, if they were able to put it into specific tasks and use codes for those tasks, and there are some efforts underway to create a national classification. But frankly, on the lawyer adoption side, I feel like that's kind of unlikely. Lawyers are notoriously difficult to modify their behaviors. They're well-oiled machines. They have their processes. To disrupt those processes and add something like that in, very difficult. Now, if you have a system that can automatically classify those things based on the narrative, I mean, now we're getting somewhere. And you may have heard there's like the first AI lawyer that's come out, Ross Intelligence, and I will put that in quotes, big fat quotes, first AI lawyer. And in the research world, that those kind of solutions are a bit more feasible because they're not really dealing with, and again, Ross is a Watson-powered legal research tool. Legal research doesn't really contain any sensitive client information. You just, it's like running a Google search, right? You don't necessarily know who you're running it on behalf of, for what reason. So anyway, that leads me to the biggest, what I view as the biggest barrier to legal tech adoption, at law firms at least, is the cloud. It's a problem. We have clients that won't let us use it for anything, for storing or processing their information, and which makes it very difficult to silo clients that do, that are okay with it and their information versus clients that aren't. And usually the clients that aren't are the ones that are, regularly paying their very, significant bills. So it's really those technologies that have developed hybrid deployment technologies or approaches, or just fully on-premise deployments. Those are the ones that we tend to find greater adoption for, but of course also tend to be less effective than the purely cloud-based ones. Anyway, I'll move on to someone else.
I mean, for me, in the legal services sector, the biggest change I've seen, especially from 10 years ago when I used to practice law, is the advent of quantitative analytics. I mean, when I practiced 10 years ago, you couldn't find a lawyer that knew how to use MX Excel. We literally just use Microsoft Word, right? And you got to look at the profile of the lawyer, right? The modern lawyer is typically a person that probably didn't like the sciences or the maths, right? They're more into the liberal arts or the social sciences. And I think that created a barrier for quantitative analytics. People just didn't gravitate to it naturally. These days, I feel like virtually every startup probably does some, in the legal services sector, does some form of quantitative analytics. It's a long time coming, especially if you compare it to, say, the financial services sector, right, where it came in the 70s and 80s, right, with the Bloombergs and all that. So that's the biggest change I've seen, where the lawyers are finally realizing the power of the quants and how they're now beginning to adopt technology that can give them insights through data.
I think the examples of successes that I've seen are where government acted to liberate data. So in my industry, the example of that is the deployment of smart meters that you may have heard about and probably have at your home that allowed to collect interval data about energy usage. And then what my agency in particular worked on is making this data available to everybody really who wanted to build apps and offer services to peoples and businesses of how to use their energy or all kinds of things really. And so what the California did was basically develop a platform for people to register to be able to download this data in a common format, and then also develop data privacy rules that basically stripped any personal and identifiable information and rolled up the data to a certain level that it was anonymized. So in my experience of dealing with big government is that it's a lot faster when the government allows for something to happen and kind of gets out of the way. I think the big exceptions to that are really defense and cybersecurity, where government does actually collect the information and builds the tools to solve problems. But in other areas, I think, yeah, it works well when the government just allows the access to the data.
Yeah, along those lines, someone from the California Department of Justice recently told me that there's a 1930 penal code law that gives the DOJ access to every single database, government database in the state of California for the purpose of policy making. This means that, you know, if you're the DMV or the health department or any government agency, that data is subject for review. And no one's really called on this code. It was the founder of California's Open Justice Initiative found it, and he saw it and he was like, "Oh my God, like, this is groundbreaking. This is real access for real change."
Well, so hopefully, can somebody like call the DMV line waiting time into question and analyze what's going on there? But should you be a government body to request this? Is it open to the public? So it's not free?
It's not open to the public, so it's for the Department of Justice to access on behalf of the public.
Who can call, like, can the public act and compel Department of Justice to request a review of certain piece of data?
Yeah, actually. It's not like a FOA request, which is Freedom of Information Act request. That's a federal government request, but this is slightly different. They're hosting these open justice hackathons, and they're open to the public. And these are a great place to come to put in your requests and to get in touch with people within the DOJ that can really put into process something.
Interesting. So we should look this up. I want to pick up on something you mentioned. I think you all mentioned that you have all different kinds of documents, right? So I think that's another area where government and law are very much related, is that I wonder how much of your day do you spend in front of documents? What do you do with them? What people in your profession do with them? And how do they exchange these documents? How do they iterate on them? And I have another hat. I'm a chief scientist at Nitro, which is a PDF provider. And so, it's an established company which basically competes with Adobe. So we have a reader called Nitro PDF. So it's a pretty well established legacy technology, but what I see, a lot of people are sending files to each other, right? And so I wonder, basically, how much of your life are these documents, and essentially, what are the productivity improvements or deficiencies you see happening around documents?
I love this question. I wish you let me use my PowerPoint presentation, because my first slide was a close-up of something that's called a rubber finger, which is a little rubber thing that you put on top of your finger to help you flick through paper faster, and also to avoid getting ink on your hands, which is a problem that most of you, I'm assuming, don't have. But in my office, we actually have a supply cabinet full of those damn things, because we are still very heavily, actually fully paper agency. There are a lot of processes that are completely lack any kind of automation. to the point where we have, like one of the things that my group does is processes applications of like limousine companies and drivers to get your TCP number. And you have to go and fill out this form. And we did build a website where you can go and fill that in. Well, on the back end, it just prints it into paper, and then we have to go and file it and do everything else, and then send a physical paper confirmation back to the person. And those forms don't actually even have a field for email. So even when we have made attempts to digitize parts of this process, there's again limitations that we never collected emails for anybody, so you still have to print the invoices and physically stuff them in envelopes and mail them out. So I personally see a great range of everything in government. You have pockets where, like when I work with the Office of Emergency Services and DHS on certain infrastructure security issues, where you can see great sophistication. And then you see other parts of the process where, you're using the rubber finger to, flip through hundreds and hundreds of documents that are not digitized in any shape or form, like that example of the front end of the web. And it gets people so frustrated because they think they filled in the web form and they're like, why the heck is it taking you so long, right? But on the back end, it's literally getting printed and we don't even have a digital record of it, because as it's printing it, it's not even saving a PDF version of it in the database. I mean, there is literally just a script that says, okay, somebody filled this thing in, hit the print button, and that's how it goes. So yes, there's a lot of opportunity for improvement. Let's just end it on this positive note.
I'll just add real quickly. I am personally incredibly lucky to I've never had to use one of those rubber fingers. In our office, I think what's great is we're leapfrogging. We're really looking at how to make data accessible. There's lots of laws and rules around making documents and records retention, all that sorts of stuff. So in my day-to-day, I don't have to interact with it, but in working with departments, I'd say I was actually pleasantly surprised. It came up less than I thought. It still comes up. I think we have a lot of departments that are in this sort of in-between stage where there are records, like really good data, structured data around something, but not all the elements were put in the database. So you still got to go and pull that permit record, that gets that's always a little frustrating, because you'll get a data request and then you realize, oh, that never got modeled. It is maybe as of 2013, but before that, you still got to go and pull those records. So there's still work to be done. I think going forward, some departments are leapfrogging. They are putting forms online. And those are actually going into databases. And I think there's an opportunity still to. The tools have gotten easier and easier, and I think I hope that my peers in government start to leverage those more and more, because those workflows are becoming even easier.
I'll be quick on this one, but one of my major projects is actually coding up all of the legal forms to use in a document automation system. The one we use is called Contract Express. So, I take a Word document and I, put conditional spans around things and create variables and computable variables, et cetera, and then I create a questionnaire based on, that markup. What we're going to be doing soon, I hope, is actually making it so that this questionnaire, which is currently only really completed by the lawyer internally now, is going to be actually completed by the client in part. So an example would be an incorporation. So currently, our attorneys, when they onboard a new client, they send over, at best, a PDF, a fillable PDF. Which then comes back in, and previously, they would take that PDF and then, create the, separate legal documents, opening up previous ones and then saving as, et cetera. Now, they take that PDF information and, they put it into the internal document automation system. Going forward, what I'm hoping is that the client will fill in much of the information. It'll go right into the document automation system, and documents are created right then and there. The benefit of all of this as well is that we're starting to capture all of this data in a structured, actionable way, not just residing in disparate PDF files at best.
Sadly, unlike Brad's firm, most law firms I've seen are still super old school. You mentioned PDF being a legacy document. Most attorneys I deal with still use vanilla MS Word. I mean, the same product you use to prepare your high school essays, I mean, these lawyers are using to prepare incredibly technical documents, right? Which is just maddening when you think about how technical the subject matter is, when how fallible human beings are. And yeah, it's just really surprising how old school most lawyers still are, which is great for folks like us, right? Because it creates an opportunity where you can use tech to just make people's lives easier, make their work product better, help their reputation out. So that's been the biggest surprise for me, just how old school it all still is.
I just have a quick comment. Codex has a project right now called Computable Contracts, and the idea is to create a computable format with declarative language to basically execute on the terms. And so as you write the contract, it actually goes into a database, and then the database has all these rules and some logic that can help you work through all the terms of the contract. That is it's fairly new, and I think that if there's people in the crowd that are interested in being connected to that, we'd love more minds on it.
Interesting. So I think at this point maybe we'll ask if the audience have questions for any of the panelists or for the panel as a whole. Okay, so we can bring the mic to you. If we have a volunteer. Yes, so Matt will bring the mic to the question.
Yes. Who is the gentleman with the question?
Just introduce yourself, please.
Vlad Kuznetsov. For the legal kind of profession, I thought I hate to name your competitors' names, but Wilson Sonsini and Perkins Coie already have like automated like contract filling for incorporation and kind of percolator and the open contracts. So I thought that was already a trend.
So yeah, we do have something like that. It's called CooleyGo, CooleyGo.com, which I do manage actually. And yes, you can go in there, but that's not for client use. The version that we have internally is much more robust. I'll call it. Yeah, but thank you for giving me the opportunity to plug CooleyGo.
Yeah, and a follow-up also. Do you see also the first cases where like human against AI cases, and maybe somebody starting to specialize in that? Like AI made the fault, and then the humans suing AI systems?
I have not, but I look forward to the day when I see So again, there's a distinction between I don't know if this is what you're driving at, but for example, LegalZoom, right? They escape liability as a lawyer, right? Because they're not providing legal advice, right? They are, you'll see it everywhere, like, these documents were prepared at your direction, I think it is, right? And that's because we're just saying to you, how many shares do you want, to purchase, right? We just ask you basically, questions. We don't tell you what those answers should be in your particular situation. We may say generally X or Y. Now, where that could get into trouble in terms of AI versus man, is where we start relying on vendors, maybe like Gary over here, whose products are, maybe making decisions. Right? I mean, it's a really interesting area, right? At what point does a software product become a lawyer? And I mean, I've been I've been racking my brain in particular about like Ethereum, right, and smart contracts. Like, at what point does someone who's coding a smart contract become a lawyer? Like, are they giving legal advice when you're drafting a smart contract? At what point does that happen? But no, to answer your question, I haven't seen it yet.
So this is a question for the Codex project that you were just talking about. I was kind of wondering if this contract system is going to be something similar to like if this then that, or Zapier, of like, oh, this thing happens and you can declaratively say, oh, this amount of money should be dispersed, or...
Just introduce yourself.
Sorry?
Introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Samir. I work at Mattermark. I lead the machine learning team there.
And like, what's the? I'm actually also a fellow at Codex, not as deeply involved as Nicole, but I would also be curious to know how that computational contract project reacts to things like Ethereum that are coming out.
Yeah. So there's a few ways to approach it. So one of it is standardized forms for certain contracts, right? You can have a standardized prenup. You could have there's a number of standardized contracts out there. And then once you agree that these are the key terms, you can do a similar if this then that type of declarative form. The project is, it's at a point where does it make sense to borrow another language? Is it an XML type of a markup, or is it, what should it be, and how do you plug in the more complex contingencies into it? That's still being worked out. And in regards to, Brad, your point of bringing up Ethereum's really interesting, but it's still a little hard to use. So there was, we have lots of presentations at Codex every week. On Thursday, we have a new legal technology project that comes and presents. And there was recently one called DocAssemble. And DocAssemble put together an entire library that was trying to coach lawyers to set up their own computable contracts. So it was like, well, here are kind of the key things you need to get, and then here are the things you can add in. And he thought that, anyone could figure out how to read the instructions on how to use this library. The reality is that lawyers are not even capable of doing really basic deployment of code. So
that's the understatement of the day right there.
Yeah.
But should that really be necessary? Like, shouldn't the abstraction not really need people to do that?
Exactly. So that's the design layer, and there's another fellow in my group, Margaret Hagan, and that's all she does. She is like, okay, let's think about the people and who they are when they go home and wake up and after they have their coffee, and then let's think about, when they sit down at their computer, like how much time are they really going to spend, trying to figure out something new, and what colors do they like? So
Is there potentially a chance that like something like LitIQ, or even with LitIQ, there's like unsupervised learning of what the contract should be doing, and it just turns it into the computational contract?
Yeah, I've seen some stuff like that. Well, then you go into kind of the NLP area.
You should work with Gary.
And that's a Gary. Yeah, that seems like a Gary question.
Fellow at Stanford Codex.
Oh, cool.
We've got them all.
This is already happening, huh?
We have a question back there.
Hi, my name's Matthew Seal. I work at OpenGov, which is a company down here in Redwood City. But my question was more, you brought up the kind of hackathons and the idea of the Justice Department open kind of access to try and get data and get code to do something with that data. Have you found in the governments with the hackathons and the government-sponsored coding events, have they actually contributed to improving some of these problems you've described, or have they so far just kind of been interesting ideas that haven't come to full fruition?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure, I'll go for it. You know, I personally find that, you know, while those can be useful to jumpstart some initial ideas, but we're not getting enough traction to actually, you know, turn these into really serious projects. So, you know, I've gone to some energy-related ones, and most of them result in somewhat superficial results because, you know, even the, you know, whichever industry we're talking about, whether it's energy or, you know, you're really talking about government, a lot of the problems are really not because there aren't, you know, some obvious solutions that haven't really been thought. It's that the systems are extremely complicated, whether the regulatory systems or just the industry dynamics or people components, and there, you know, and there is a barrier to entry when you're starting to talk about some of those things, and that requires real engagement. So I get a lot of requests, for example, from startups or, you know, data scientists who have a bright idea and they come in all excited and they try to sell me on it. And I try to explain to them, well, it's not that I don't buy into your idea. It actually sounds great, but in order to actually materialize it, you're going to have to engage in our process. You're going to need to understand how, you know, state procurement system works if you're trying to sell to an agency. If you're trying to solve the poll example that I'm talking about, it's not going to be enough for you to go sit and code the solution. That's not the complicated part. The complicated part is integrating into the ecosystem of governments and research labs and poll owners and poll attachers, and really, you know, solving it as at that level of all the parties coming together. And that's where I kind of see that gap, that the hackathon type model, it really focuses heavily on the coding part, but a lot of the solutions really would require multiple people coming together that's not, you know, just focused on the code part of it.
Ditto. So real quick, yeah, I think there needs to be a maturation of the way we do hackathons, particularly when it relates to the public sector for all the reasons mentioned. I think a shift is coming. I think as data becomes more accessible, it becomes easier to have ongoing engagements, to have conversations about data, Kaggle and other platforms that allow you to explore. And so you have these sort of ongoing engagements that are, it's not about a single event. It's not about, it doesn't put the pressure to like produce, right? Like it's not Facebook. I mean, I love the fact that they can build products so quick. We can't do that. Like we do have to deal with all those other things. And you know, some people may think that's a flaw, but I think that's just a feature. There's just stuff that you have to deal with. And I think a couple models that I really like, or one that I really like is what Caravan Studios does out of TechSoup. And they do these generators. And they actually get with subject matter experts, and they have a whole process to really generate things that can actually get adoption. And then National Day of Civic Hacking, Civic Makers, I don't know if Lawrence is here, but National Day of Civic Hacking is, despite the name, going to be focused more on this time around doing that part, like getting to understand the issues. We might not even write a piece of code that weekend. And then Code for San Francisco meets every week, so we'll continue that engagement. So that feels more promising to me than these one-off kind of events.
Thank you. And so I think we're kind of coming to our ending time. I want to ask each of the panelists a wrap-up question, and kind of Brad inspired me when we talked with Brad about this panel, and I mentioned various legal startups which we have. It looked like all of them tried to sell to him. So he knew all of technology because obviously legal startups, they come into big firms and offer their products. So I kind of want to pick up on this and basically ask you guys, so we have a lot of startups and innovators in the community. So they want to disrupt either legal or government spheres. So what would be your advice to startups which want to sell to legal firms or engage in this market? And for the government folks, I would probably kind of pose two options. Either, you know, if you want to affect real change with digital transformation, what should you do? And if you're a startup hoping to sell to the government, should you hope so, or what should you do, right? So like I will kind of pose this two ways, right? Because you can either try to, enter the market as a provider of government services, or you can try to kind of join the government and do something from the inside.
One, don't build cloud only if you plan to process or store client confidential information. For us, I think that I'm sure there are some firms out there, perhaps ones that that are our size too or bigger, that may be more amenable to that. I'm sure there are solos and medium-sized law firms that may not have an issue with it. We do, and from what I've heard, a lot do. Two, shy away from that VC money. Try and bootstrap as much as you can, and have patience, and have I'd say a 12-month runway, at least from the time you start selling to a law firm. We aren't as bad, it sounds, as the government, perhaps. I wouldn't say we have a 3-year sales cycle, which is crazy. I thought we were bad, but I'm being asked soon to put together a budget for next year, right? There are 5 things that I still want to do this year that came up this year, and so I'm working hard internally to try and create like an R&D department with a budget that we can more quickly stand up, prototypes or pilots. But in the meantime, we have 100 things to do, and we have one guy that does the security evaluations, right, of prospective vendors. And you just have to understand that even though a law firm is really big, it does not necessarily have the kind of resources that like a large multinational corporation has to vet, deploy, test products. And you have to understand that for us to do a proof of concept or a pilot, there's a high bar, because we don't have like a group of lawyers that are dedicated to trying new technologies. Part of my job is bringing that lawyer mentality and vetting something before it gets to the associates, which before that gets to the partners. And putting a new technology in front of lawyers, even a small pilot group, it takes a massive amount of resources. So thank you for your empathy. And I think that's it.
Over my 2 startups selling to law firms, learned a couple lessons. So first off, if you're in the B2B space and you're selling a software product, look, the most compelling thing you can do is help your customer make revenue, right? This is why the financial service sector is the largest purchaser of tech, right? They can help them do quicker trades, whatnot. You're never gonna be able to do that in legal, right? You're never gonna help a lawyer make more money, unfortunately, right? So what are you selling then? What's your pitch point? I try to mentor a lot of legal tech entrepreneurs when they come through. Most folks, when they come in, they come in from a different sector and they want to sell efficiency. They want to sell efficiency. And lawyers, I guess they conceptually get efficiency, but it's not their top of mind pain point. Gee, I need to be more efficient, right? More powerful is if you can solve a pain point. Whether it's just current workflow that's crappy or tedious or whatnot, solving a pain point, I think, is the best you can do, because you're not going to help them make more money, and don't try to sell efficiency. It's just not going to work. Otherwise, I concur with everything Brad says. Don't take venture in legal. You should have a pathway to break even, ideally with 24 to 36 months. But once you do sell, it's a great market to sell to, because they're incredibly loyal customers. They don't really churn out. It's a beautiful market if you can just figure out the customer acquisition process.
I guess switching gears to government, I would say that there are 3 primary models of selling or engaging with government. And first is directly to government, right? When the government agency is your client. And there are firms who specialize in that and are very successful. You do have to be extremely patient, and there is a path to that I won't go into details, but you can reach out to me if you're interested. The second path is public-private partnerships. And that's really when you're not selling to government, but you're trying to get on the ground floor of solving a problem. So the example of that is polls. How do you do that? You have to be an industry expert. You have to understand what the problem is. You have to understand who the players are, follow those conversations, and start kind of getting in on the ground floor to become part of solving that. And the exciting part there is that it's a lot of work, but I mean, there's a ton of money because like with polls, it's a $10 billion plus problem. So there's a big potential in those kinds of issues. And then I think the third kind of sales path is following the R&D model, and so knowing what kind of issues the government is interested in solving, and then learning the grants paths and how to get those government money. So there's always, you can apply for a grant for your idea, and there's different phases of it. It can be a very early stage R&D all the way through to proof of concept in real life. And that's its own path that requires knowledge of how to apply for those grants and get the R&D funding. So I would say figure out which of those three models suits you best, and then learn how to work that area and go forward.
I just have a quick anecdote about body-worn cameras. So there are very few good vendors in the body-worn camera space, and it is a huge need, and the government is putting a lot of money in. But a lot of these body-worn camera companies sell us data storage with the hardware. The problem is it's really crappy and really expensive, to the point where there are some police departments in the United States that are having to decide between hiring a new police officer or buying more data storage for camera footage. And this is not even reviewed camera, it's just raw film. They haven't even got use out of it yet. So I would, encourage people to really think about this space. I think it's going to be an important one.
It would be hard for me to give. There's a lot of challenges in selling to government in general. I think it depends on the scale. So at the local level, if you're selling to a single government and that's it, it's actually not that hard. But the problem is that that's not what you want, right? In San Francisco, for example, the vendor process is a pain in the butt, but the information's all there. I actually talked to a startup in San Francisco that said, "Oh, I walked down and I went to the office, and it turned out I had everything I needed to be a certified vendor with the city." But that doesn't, like doing that for every city, right? Like that's not the business you want to be in, and that's why folks like these larger firms, they have big sales teams, right? Because they can do those cycles, they can get on those. So it is hard. I think there are a couple of things to watch out for. I think, coming down the line, that is, I think government is going to get a little bit smarter about procurement, particularly in the technology space, because there is a broad acknowledgement that the way that technology is being purchased, it cannot be purchased the same way that we purchase pencils and other commodities, and there's this blurring between services and technology, and that it's starting to get a little bit more cleanly defined, and so that's happening. I think that will continue to happen, and so my broader advice is, find your community a little bit. There's a lot of there's emerging interest in this, right? Civic tech, gov tech. It goes by a couple of different names, but there are others in this space that are trying to figure it out, and I would band together, understand that understand how governments work, and figure that out together rather than on your own, because it's hard to navigate by yourself. And to echo a point made earlier about pain points, I mean, I've seen a lot of activity or behavior where someone has a product and they're just trying to make it work for city of San Francisco, and it doesn't work. This seeking behavior is, if you really want to, it needs to actually address an actual pain point. So the body cameras issue is a very good one, and that's a sort of a hidden from view issue that you've brought out, but like these are the kinds of things like you really need to do your research to really understand like what does government really need? Do we need yet another data platform that does blah blah, you know, standard things that we are commodity, or you know, what do we need? So I think really asking yourself those questions. And also one last thing, one thing, this is just a personal bias I have, unless the solution is very specific to government's problems, I always have an allergic reaction to any vendor that says, I know the government, and I know that goes against what I just said, but someone, like particularly if you're selling a product that is really is a commodity, is something that's a platform that lots and lots of people are selling, I've seen a lot of people say, this is specific to government, and it's not. And be careful of that, because if you are siloing yourself into trying to sell only to government, but your platform actually solves a lot of different problems at scale, go there too. So don't, you know, I think there's all broad advice. It just depends on the product. It depends on where you're at. I don't know enough about funding cycles to give you any kind of advice on what to do there. But in general, understand the space as much as you can.
Thank you very much. I think that's probably all the time we had, and I want to thank the panelists for deep insights into their fields. So.